The little girl's voice trembled as she looked up at the police officer, her tiny hands clutching the seatbelt across her chest. "He's not my dad," she whispered. Those 4 words sent a chill down the officer's spine. Just moments earlier, he had pulled over a car for a routine traffic stop. Nothing unusual, nothing out of the ordinary. But now, everything had changed. The driver, a middle-aged man with a nervous smile, quickly tried to explain. "She's my niece," he said, his fingers gripping the steering wheel just a little too tightly. "We're on our way home." But something wasn't right. The girl's eyes darted around, wide with fear. She wasn't crying, she wasn't screaming, but her silence said more than words ever could. The officer crouched down to her level, his voice calm but firm. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" he asked. The girl hesitated. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The man in the driver's seat tensed. That's when the officer felt it, that gut instinct every cop learns to trust. A crackle came through his radio. Dispatch was running the plates. Seconds ticked by, stretching into what felt like an eternity. Then the reply came. The name on the registration didn't match the story the driver had given. The officer's hand instinctively moved toward his holster. The little girl finally found her voice. "Please," he whispered, "help me." That was all he needed to hear. What happened next would send shockwaves through the quiet neighborhood and reveal a chilling truth no one saw coming. Stay with us as we take you through the incredible real-life story of a brave little girl, a determined officer, and a moment that changed everything. The officer's heartbeat quickened, but his face remained steady. He knew he had to keep things calm, for the little girl's sake. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle," he said, his voice firm but controlled. The man hesitated. His fingers tapped against the steering wheel, his eyes darting between the officer and the rearview mirror. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked, forcing a laugh. The girl sat frozen in the passenger seat, her small hands gripping the fabric of her dress. The officer noticed how she shrank into herself, as if trying to disappear. That was all the confirmation he needed. Dispatch came through again. The man's name still wasn't matching up with any guardianship records. No reported relation to the girl, no sign of custody, nothing. "I need you to step out of the car," the officer repeated, this time with more force. The man's jaw tightened. For a split second, it looked like he might refuse. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, he unbuckled his seatbelt and pushed the door open. As he stepped onto the pavement, the officer caught something, just the smallest flicker of frustration in the man's face. The officer's partner, standing nearby, kept a close watch as the first officer leaned down to the little girl's level. "Can you tell me your name, sweetheart?" he asked softly. Her lips trembled, but she didn't answer. Instead, she looked past the officer, back at the man who had just been pulled from the car. Her face paled. Her breath came faster. The officer glanced at his partner. No words needed to be said. They both knew something was very, very wrong, and they were running out of time. The officer could feel the tension thick in the air. He stole another glance at the little girl. She was barely moving, her eyes glued to the ground, her shoulders curled inward like she wanted to disappear. Every instinct in him screamed that she was terrified. But of what or who? The man cleared his throat, shifting uneasily under the officer's watchful gaze. "Look, I don't know what she's telling you, but this is all a misunderstanding," he said, forcing another nervous laugh. "Kids get scared, you know. She's just shy." The officer wasn't buying it. He had seen fear before, real fear. This wasn't just shyness. This was something else. His partner stayed close, watching every move the man made, ready for anything. Then, something small but important happened. The girl finally looked up, not at the officer, but past him, toward the gas station across the street. Her expression shifted, just for a second. Hope, recognition, someone she knew. The officer followed her gaze, scanning the area. A woman was inside the store, pacing, phone pressed to her ear. The radio crackled again. "We got a missing child report," dispatch confirmed. 6-year-old girl. Taken from a park about an hour ago. Description matches. The officer's grip on his belt tightened. He met his partner's eyes. This was it. Before he could react, the man moved. A quick step back. A glance toward the car door. An escape plan forming right in front of them. The officer's heart pounded. He had to act fast. If this man got away, the truth. Old girl. Taken from a park about an hour ago. Description matches. The officer's grip on his belt tightened. He met his partner's eyes. This was it. Before he could react, the man moved. A quick step back. A glance toward the car door. An escape plan forming right in front of them. The officer's heart pounded. He had to act fast. If this man got away, the truth, whatever it was, might never come to light. And that little girl, still frozen in the passenger seat, might never make it home. The officer's pulse pounded in his ears. He could see it. The man was about to run. His eyes flicked toward the open driver's side door, his muscles tensing like a coiled spring. One wrong move, and he'd be gone. "Don't," the officer warned, his voice sharp. His hand hovered near his holster, but he didn't reach for it, not yet. His goal was to de-escalate, to keep the girl safe. But the man wasn't listening. The girl let out a small gasp as the man suddenly lunged. In one swift motion, he reached for the door handle. The officer reacted instantly, grabbing his arm, but the man twisted, jerking free. Tires screeched somewhere in the distance. A car horn blared. The world around them blurred into chaos. The officer's partner jumped in, blocking the man's path just as he tried to dive back into the car. "Step back," the partner ordered, arms outstretched, keeping a barrier between the suspect and the child. Inside the car, the girl's breathing grew uneven. Her hands trembled. She looked from the officers to the man, eyes pleading, frozen in the moment. Then, from across the street, a scream. The woman inside the gas station had rushed out, her face pale with panic. "That's my daughter," she cried, her phone still clutched in her shaking hands. Everything happened at once. The man spun around, his face contorted in frustration. The officers moved in. The girl gasped, eyes wide as the truth unraveled in real time. For one split second, time stood still. And then, chaos erupted. The mother's desperate cry cut through the chaos, but the man didn't flinch. Instead, something shifted in his expression, not fear, not regret, but something closer to frustration. Like his plan was falling apart, and he knew he was running out of time. The officer's grip tightened. "Hands where I can see them," he ordered. The man's eyes darted around, scanning for an escape. Then the unexpected happened. The little girl, who had been silent and frozen in fear, suddenly shook her head. "No," she whispered. "He's not alone." The officer barely had time to register her words before the roar of an engine filled the air. A black SUV, parked just down the street, lurched forward. The tires screeched against the pavement as it sped toward them. The mother gasped, stumbling backward. The officer's partner shouted, reaching for his radio. The man in the officer's grip made his move. Using the brief distraction, he twisted hard, breaking free. In a blur of movement, he lunged toward the car, his fingers barely grazing the handle before the officer tackled him to the ground. The little girl let out a cry as the SUV veered dangerously close, then swerved at the last second. The passenger window rolled down just enough for someone inside to yell, "Let's go." But the man was pinned, his face pressed against the pavement, his escape route slipping away. The officer's mind raced. This wasn't just one man. There were more people involved. Another car. Another person. Another piece of a story that was still unraveling. And the worst part? Whoever was in that SUV, they were getting away. The officer barely had time to react as the SUV sped off, its tires screeching against the pavement. His partner shouted into the radio, calling for backup. The mother was sobbing now, her hands clasped over her mouth as she watched everything unfold. But the man on the ground was still struggling, thrashing against the officer's grip. "It's over," the officer growled, pressing him down firmly. The suspect let out a grunt, his face twisted in frustration. He had lost, but something in his eyes said this wasn't the end. Then, from the distance, sirens. Backup was closing in. The little girl was still in the car, her hands gripping the seat. She was watching everything, her breathing shallow, her body tense. But when the officer turned to check on her, something strange happened. She wasn't looking at him. She was staring past him, at the man on the ground. And that's when she whispered something that sent a chill down the officer's spine. "He knows where they took her." The officer froze. "Who?" he asked, his voice steady but urgent. The girl's hands clenched into fists. "The other girl," she said, barely above a whisper. "There was another girl with me." For a moment, everything else faded, the SUV getting away, the sirens growing louder, the mother still crying in the background. The officer turned back to the suspect, his grip tightening. "Where is she?" he demanded. The man only smirked. The officer's chest tightened. This wasn't just one kidnapping. This was bigger. And somewhere out there, another child was still waiting to be found. The officer's grip on the suspect didn't loosen. "Where is she?" he repeated, his voice sharp, unrelenting. For the first time, the man hesitated. The smirk faded just a little. The weight of the situation was settling in. He wasn't going anywhere, and the officers weren't letting this go. Then the radio crackled again. "We've got eyes on the SUV," dispatch reported. "Pursuit in progress." Relief washed over the officer, but only for a second. They still needed answers. The little girl's words echoed in his mind. Another child was out there, scared and waiting to be found. The mother knelt beside her daughter, pulling her into a tight embrace. Tears streamed down her face, but the little girl didn't cry. She just held on, gripping her mother like she never wanted to let go. More officers arrived, securing the scene, taking the suspect into custody. As he was led toward the squad car, he finally muttered something under his breath. A name, a location. It was enough. Within the hour, officers found the second missing child in an abandoned house just outside town. She was shaken, but unharmed, safe. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the officer watched the little girl reunite with her mother, the weight of the day settling in his chest. He had seen darkness before, but he had also seen something stronger, bravery. The courage of a child who spoke up, the determination of a mother who never stopped searching, and the instinct of a cop who knew when something wasn't right. Tonight, 2 little girls were going home, and that was all that mattered.